Back to the Future, up and running and obtained through legitimate and legal means. I should probably give a bit of backstory because some of you guys can't use Google and just have to make my job harder. So here we go. The game came out in September of 1989 and was developed by an Australian company named Beam Software, but like I said, they're Australian so nobody gave a shit about them. The publisher was a company called LJN, and I don't get why people hated them so much. They had a rainbow as their logo, so they seem pretty progressive if you ask me, but enough fooling around, it's time to be super serious and review this game. I don't understand how people find this entertaining. All you do is walk, and walk, and walk, and avoid obstacles, and collect clocks, and that's it. You can grab a bowling ball and send the enemies to hell where they belong. That kinda makes the game more enjoyable. You can also get a skateboard, which sucks. Why? I don't know, it just sucks. Also, something, he's wearing a black t-shirt, cry cry cry, why isn't it red? Honestly, I kinda like it because it makes him look badass. And that's what you need when playing a video game, is a cool badass. It worked in games like Doom, Duke Nukem, Serious Sam, Lester the Unlikely, among other cool 90s and early 2000s games I can list here. Also, cafe segments bad, I'm not even going to play them, they're too hard and make me cry, next. This song is so cool that it plays for the entire game. Actually no, it's fucking dog shit, but it does play for the entirety of the game. Also something, it's not from the movie, so I have to mention that and make a big deal out of it for no reason. Have I done a good job not copying the AVGN and Irate Gamer? I think I have. Also, have I praised the game in any way? Because I think there was a rule about that too.
And the reviews that are actually positive don't count. I am specifically talking about reviews criticizing the game.
But why? What if I actually like the game? I mean, I don't, but it's okay for what it is. It's just not something that interests me.
I'm serious. I'm not gonna sit back and take this fucking shit.
Honestly, fuck this, I'm done. This game is so bad that I wish I could go back in time and politely ask the people at LJN to not make it. Honestly, screw this, I got more important shit I gotta be doing. I will see you all whenever I make another video. Please have a good day. Let's talk about one of my favorite topics when it comes to video games, retro first-person shooters. I've made it pretty clear on most of my platforms that I'm a huge fan of first-person shooters. It's only my favorite pastime besides bullying holier-than-thou people on Elon Musk's hellscape. Actually, that's kind of fucked up and paints me in a bad light. I should probably stop right now. Anyways, the two FPS games you'll likely find me gushing about the most are Wolfenstein 3D and the classic Doom duology, as these were the games that helped me develop a fascination of the genre and have grown to be games that have earned a special fondness to me in spite of their age and limitations. However, these are not the first games that I played in their respective style. In fact, there was one game that I had played as a child that had helped me resonate with these games more, long before I was even aware of what a Doom or Wolfenstein was. Unfortunately, if I were to call this game impressive, I'm not sure if I can say with confidence it's for a positive reason. Enter Dark Arena, a first-person shooter released in 2002 on the Game Boy Advance, which was developed by the now-defunct Graphic State and published by Majesco. It's a pretty straightforward first-person shooter, and wears its classic influences on its sleeve because it's a literal copy of Doom. Its influences are apparent because it's basically just Doom Can I Copy Your Homework edition. Now, don't get me wrong, it wasn't uncommon for FPS games released in the 90s to be referred to as Doom clones, because of how popular Doom was at the time, as well as the term first-person shooter not well being established yet. But remember, this game released in 2002, long after first-person shooters as a whole had evolved from its original label, technologically and thematically. So the fact that this game is a literal Doom clone, 9 years after the original Doom 1 came out, I don't know, I just think it's funny. But is the game good? Well, that's gonna take a bit of time to properly explain.
1 month ago, the United Arms Organization completed work on a top-secret training camp for its elite forces.
Oh my god, totally legit organization, oh my god.
Genetically engineered life forms were created to provide the ultimate combat foe within a controlled environment. The creatures were engineered to be strong, aggressive, and fearless.
Oh my god, that's terrifying. I'm shitting my pants right now, man. And nah, fuck it, this is taking too long. I'll just condense this so we can get to the actual good stuff. The game takes place on a planet far away from Earth. The United Arms Organization, whatever that is, because this isn't a real organization, had built a secret training facility, codenamed the Dark Arena, on a remote island in order to train its troops for whatever vague threat they were supposed to be fighting. Probably demons. Actually, wait, shit, that's from that other game that this game's trying to be. Sorry, anyways, back on point. To prepare them, the UAO had their scientists create genetically superior life forms that the soldiers would fight in combat that were kept under intense security measures to ensure that they couldn't escape. Unfortunately, the facility's failsafe system blue-screened, and the genetic life forms proceeded to overrun the training ground and kill every soldier in the complex. You play as Angelina Bradshaw, a member of a special operations team sent to the Dark Arena to neutralize the threat. However, every member of your team, but you, has also been killed by the monsters, so you are left on your own to attempt to rid the Dark Arena of hideous mutants. Also, no, this isn't some Metroid-style cock tease. This is how she appears in the game, and we never actually see how she looks in person. Sorry to disappoint some sad chud who stumbled across this video and thought they found their new waifu. And while it's on my mind, the backstory leaves me with more questions than answers. Who is this organization? Why are they on an alien planet? Why did they need to create this top-secret Dark Arena on a remote island if they were already on an alien planet? What were they fighting that required them to create man-killing, genetically superior life forms just to train their soldiers? Hell, as a matter of fact, why didn't they create these things to fight whatever it is they are presumably at war with? These are honestly more interesting than the actual plot of the game, but I digress. Let's get to the gameplay. So, as expected, the game, not surprisingly, looks and plays like Doom. It even copies the id Software style HUD that features the player character's face in the middle. Except in this case it doesn't really work because we can't even see her reactions because she's wearing a helmet. Also, I'm pretty sure this is just a static image, so it's basically worthless. Lol. Anyways, back on topic, the controls are pretty basic and simple. Move around with the D-pad, use the L and R buttons to strafe, A shoots, B opens doors and activates switches, and select switches weapons. It's clunky, it's not exactly the quickest when it comes to response time, but it gets the job done. The graphics are honestly better than some of the other GBA shooters I've played, but it's still about what you would expect from a 3D presenting Game Boy Advance game. Faraway objects and enemies can be a bit harder to distinguish, and the game can chug hard if too much is happening on screen at once. But for a handheld first-person shooter, it's passable. Weapon selection is also pretty good. You start off with a pistol with infinite ammo, both a blessing and a curse, I'll explain later. You also get a combat shotgun, a chain gun, a rocket launcher, a plasma gun, and even some unique weapons such as the guided missile, where you shoot and control the missile to strike enemies, which I found amusing, and the zoom-in rifle, which is supposed to emulate a sniper rifle, but all it does is make the screen turn green and make it look like a sniper scope. It still one-hit kills most of the weaker enemies though. My favorite weapon is the combat cannon, a BFG-like weapon that you charge up and shoot that can kill most enemies in one blast. Honestly, I just had fun charging it up and using it on enemies that didn't detect me yet. Also, it can kill you if you're too close to the blast radius. Honestly, you know what? Fuck this weapon, I hate it. However, there is one major downside. Once you complete a level, you start the next one with a clean slate, meaning your only weapon at the start is just the pistol, and you have to find all your weapons and ammo again. Because of this, I found myself using the pistol more often, even if I did have the other weapons. It has infinite ammo and does pretty well taking down most of the easier enemies in the game, making trying out other weapons almost discouraged since you're just going to lose them in the next level anyway. And you have this basic handgun that never runs out of bullets. Also, I'm tacking this on late in the scripting process, but you can also use mines as a weapon, but I forgot about them because I barely used them. They work alright. You lay them against the ground, and they explode once you switch weapons. Cool, I guess. Overall, the game so far is okay. Slightly flawed, but okay. Oh, but you better sit back down, this is only the start. We're about to get into the real meat and potatoes of Dark Arena, and trust me, it's a damn field day. Let's start with the enemies, because they're the main thing I found unintentionally hilarious about this game. The opening cutscene laws these life forms as cunning and smart, but the game's unpredictable AI makes them dumber than a sack of nuts. I don't know what nuts, I'll let you decide. So the way the enemies detect you seems to depend on your surroundings. In open areas, they will more than likely see you from a decent distance, but if you're too far away, they likely won't see you at all. However, in a more enclosed area, if you're just one step too close to a wall or have something slightly obstructing you, they are more than likely not going to react to you at all, even if you're right in front of them. But to make this even weirder, there's multiple instances where the enemies will react to you and even start attacking before you're even in their line of sight. Shit, I even found an instance where an enemy somehow managed to attack me through a wall and I had no way to get to him.
Extra ammunition.
When you attack an enemy, rather than fighting back, they're more than likely to run away behind a wall or some other obstruction and then stop reacting to you. To make them attack you, you'll either have to get in their line of sight or shoot them again. Finally, the hit detection for the enemies can be kinda fickle at times. This is especially noticeable when they're at a higher elevation, in which you have to be standing in a really specific spot and pray to whatever deity you believe in that you actually hit the enemy. So here's an interesting fun fact regarding the levels in this game. The maps were actually designed by people from the Doom modding scene. Graphic State contacted multiple mappers from places such as Doom World and had them send in a sample of their works to see if they should be a part of the project. If their sample was good, then they were accepted as part of the team, or at least they was supposed to be that way. Apparently the employment process was very sloppy, with some mappers claiming to have applied and were accepted to work on the game, and signed and faxed NDAs and other paperwork to the company, only for the studio to cut all contact with them out of the blue, not even responding back if the applicant attempted to reach out to them. There was also apparently disconnect between Graphic State and the actual employed mappers, as it's been alleged that Graphic State didn't even give designers a resource wad, something that would be required to make it easier to design maps around the game engine's limitations, instead just asking them to design the maps and providing a list of the in-game textures. This would also lead to instances where the mappers would design areas as they were intended to appear in Doom, only for them to not render in-game properly or cause other in-game issues, either through hardware limitations or the developers not knowing what they were doing. For example, later levels were often designed with John Romero-like traps in mind. However, the designers were likely unaware of the enemy's dodgy AI. As a result, enemies often wake up before the trap is activated. Here's two notable examples I found. First one, so clearly you can hear the enemies know I'm nearby. But look what happens when I shoot this barrel. Okay, so what was the fucking point of that? Here's the second one, and probably one of the most laughably incompetent traps I found in the game. So the enemies not only wake up before the trap is activated, but once the trap is open, you see that the alcoves are too small for the enemies, so they can't move or attack you, and they'll just die on their own if you leave them alone. Based on personal anecdotes from Doom World and blatant shit like this, you can tell there was little communication between the studio and the designers. So, developer incompetence and hardware jank aside, the basic design of the levels on their own aren't bad. They're basically Doom levels, and you can tell that they were designed by somebody with experience of the game. I've heard that Dark Arena runs on a modified version of the Doom engine, likely the Atari Jaguar version of Doom, so the levels do have lifts, elevators, higher elevated flooring, and teleportation, as opposed to being one-dimensional mazes a la Wolfenstein 3D. But being based on Jaguar Doom could also explain why the maps don't seem to appear as the designers likely intended them to. So yeah, the level designs are somewhat competent, at least from a design standpoint. So would it be considered backhanded if I proceeded to bitch about everything else about the levels? While the Doom community did their best at designing the maps, and I hope they were paid well for their service, the levels themselves are pretty fucking bland, not gonna lie. As I've mentioned, the game in its entirety takes place in a training facility that has been overrun by genetic mutant freaks. As such, every level is either a lab, training ground, office, or some weird combination of the three. Besides maybe a few new textures being used here and there, there's very little change of scenery throughout the game. Honestly, outside of getting progressively harder as expected, none of these levels really stick out above the others, and the only ones that I can say did stick out to me are the levels that clearly rip ideas directly from Doom. Level 4's start and end are very similar to those from the waste tunnels from Doom 2. And level 5 is a short arena level where you fight 2 waves of stronger than usual enemies, just like Dead Simple, also from Doom 2. Outside of those, I didn't find many of these levels fascinating. This is probably just me being petty at this point, but the overall aesthetic for this game is all over the place. The in-game textures like to jump between grungy and industrial looking, which should be expected for a super secret training facility, to super sleek, vibrant, and colorful in places they probably shouldn't be. Hell, even the enemy designs suffer from this. They're not badly designed per se, but these things are supposed to be vicious, man-killing, genetically superior life forms, and many of them have these goofy-looking cartoony designs that look more like they're from something that's trying to make fun of this concept, not something taking itself seriously. To put all of this in perspective, when you start the game, you're greeted with a dark, chilling, but admittedly flawed backstory, a tense music score, and an ominous opening screen. But when you actually start the game, the first thing you see are enemies that look like rejected Jimmy Neutron villains. Like, damn, is a consistent aesthetic that matches the atmosphere you initially try to portray too much to ask for? Speaking of atmosphere, the ambience during gameplay is kinda really bad. To start, there is no music during levels, only during the opening, results screens, the game over screen, and the end of the game. Now, on its own, this wouldn't be an issue, so long as the game is still fun and the ambience can still create an atmosphere that can keep the players engaged. But remember what game we're talking about. There's only 2 things that create any form of atmosphere. First, the enemy sound effects. As I mentioned, the game's fucked AI causes the enemies to wake up before they can see you or vice versa. It also doesn't help that many of the enemy sound effects are very grating to listen to. See what I mean? Okay, I'll give, that one's actually kinda scary. But as I mentioned before, half the time the enemies wake up before you can even see them, so you'll likely be hearing these sounds while exploring before you even encounter the enemy. And if multiple enemies are nearby and wake up, then God help you, because it feels like a sensory overload waiting to happen. The second thing that breaks the silence is the main character's personal AI assistant. At the start of each level, you're greeted with a robotic,
Be careful.
Don't tell me what to do.
Whenever you pick up a personal item or new weapon, the same robotic voice will let you know what exactly you picked up, like you couldn't figure that out yourself.
New weapon. Extra ammunition. Access card. Map display. Health. Super health.
Now, I'll admit, this didn't make or break anything for me. I didn't really give a shit, to be honest. However, I can still see people finding this irritating for fairly obvious reasons. She will bother you every time you pick something up, so I can't blame people if they did find this annoying. To paraphrase, the atmosphere in this game sucks. No music during gameplay, enemies sound like a kindergarten summer camp the moment they walk into a grocery store, and the virtual assistant may be tolerable, but your mileage may vary. I think I've wasted enough of everyone's time, so I think it's time that I start wrapping this up and conclude my thoughts on Dark Arena. While the game is definitely quite mediocre, it's far from the worst game to exist, let alone the worst FPS on the Game Boy Advance. See the GBA versions of Wolfenstein 3D and Medal of Honor Underground for worse examples. It controls decently, doesn't ruin your vision just by looking at it, and has a decent selection of weapons, even if you do lose them at the start of each level. However, it's bogged down by an uninteresting plotline, bland and samey scenery, clashing aesthetics between the opening and actual game, alleged poor communication between the designers and developers, and no genuine attempt to try something unique and instead just creating a lesser version of an already established franchise. I've heard that this was the first FPS announced for the GBA, but it was the fourth to be released. Before its release, Doom would come to the GBA several months earlier on October 26, 2001, and Doom 2 would follow on October 23, 2002, 10 months after Dark Arena's release. Both of these ports were heralded as being quite decent in spite of their limitations, so whether Dark Arena was good or not, you could probably say that it was doomed from the start. I'll see myself out now. Hell, I'll even admit that I personally think that Dark Arena looks and plays better than either of these two ports. So it's actually kinda sad that almost everything else about the game is so uninteresting. At the very least, the Doom ports keep their original game's personality and charm, even if the presentation is very much limited by the GBA's hardware. Dark Arena seems to do the exact opposite and makes the gameplay experience as dry and bare bones as possible, despite hyping itself up as this dark and scary game upon startup. Okay, so I'm checking the endings of the game, and in the hard ending, you're told that there's another training facility on a planet named Wolf 354. Yes, totally not wearing its influences on its sleeve, am I right? By the way, I'm totally not showing this to foreshadow a review of a certain Wolfenstein port on Super Nintendo. No siree, absolutely not.